All right, so let's do a quick Q&A here. Somebody on X asked, hey, Stephen, any news about a potential buyer for the company? Last time I checked, they issued more stock to the board and management, while diluting, or, why are they diluting the shareholders so much? Well, okay, a couple of thoughts here. First of all, Don Julio, thank you so much for that question. It's an excellent question. Okay, so any news about the potential buyer, or a potential buyer for the company? We're 60 days into this process, at least formally, right? From my perspective, I think there were some whispers. I mean, look, if I picked up on the fact that the company was in play at the beginning of the year, I think, and I'm certainly not somebody who had to go to extraordinary lengths to figure that out. I think there's already probably been some word in this relatively small ecosystem that Stronghold Digital Mining might be on the block, so to speak. Pardon me as I kind of take this off. It's a little bit warm in here. It's been scorching hot here in eastern Pennsylvania. And I choose not to have any AC or really fans on in this room while I'm having a conversation with you because it just makes a little bit too much noise. So anyway, are we going to have a buyer? Is there going to be a merger partner? Personally, in many ways, I really kind of hope that we can stick it out and remain an independent company. Whether we end up being a privately held company again or we stay as a public company, that's going to be a conversation for another day. But at some level, I do kind of hope that we stay independent. Now, that being said, I'm sensitive to the fact that, one can make an argument that absent there being a merger partner, we may have a hard time, right, being viable. But think about it, though. If we have a hard time being viable as an independent company, what does that tell me? Let's say I'm a company that's interested in potentially acquiring Stronghold Digital Mining. What is it communicating to me if this company can't stand on its own 2 feet, right, by itself? What am I really buying then? So, yes, there are some administrative costs associated with being a publicly traded company. I shouldn't just say some, a lot of administrative costs. Some of our friends in management have become like lightning rods for litigation, right? The company itself, is subject to a variety of different lawsuits, right? And so sometimes when you're a public company, yes, you do have access to public markets, right? Capital markets, I should say. And so that's kind of a good thing. And your share, your stock becomes like a currency. And this is kind of what gets to the second part of your question. Hey, why, I'm paraphrasing here, why is it that the board of directors and our friends in management, why are they getting stock compensation? Well, it's a very competitive labor market, right? And so we want, as a company, we want to try to attract the very best people that we can. And what better way to align the incentives of those individuals with, right, the rest of us who co-own this business than to give these individuals stock in the company as a form of compensation. Right? You give a guy, $1 million. Okay, he's got the $1 million. I mean, what does that really mean in terms of being motivated to boost shareholder value? Give that same guy $1 million worth of stock and suddenly, right? Hey, logically, you're like, hey man, I want to juice the stock price. I want to try to get this stock price up because I've got $1 million worth of this stuff. See what I mean? So I understand that in some circles, there's a little bit of frustration, confusion, just kind of the sense of, hey, why is stock being given to members of our board and, to key members of our management team? I really do think that's an important step in this highly, highly competitive labor market, right? To not only retain this talent, but to further incentivize this talent to do everything it can to really, skyrocket the stock price, right? And that's good news for the rest of us. Make sense? So jumping back now to the issue of a potential buyer, so my preference is that we stay, as an independent company to the extent that we can. More importantly, I hope that we can figure out how to become a financially viable business in all seasons, not just in a crypto summer, so to speak, right? Where hash prices are abundant, the price of Bitcoin seems to be going up by leaps and bounds, the capital markets are wide open, money's just being thrown at anything with the name, Bitcoin in it, right? That's great. I'm not knocking, a so-called Bitcoin, summer. But what happens when we go into a so-called like crypto winter? Or what happens when we're sort of in a shoulder season where things maybe are kind of muddled, like maybe right now? Stronghold Digital Mining needs to know and needs to figure out how to make that type of season viable as well. Then and only then do you have something that I think to some degree you can turn to a buyer and say, hey, do you want a turnkey, sort of like ready to run operation, right? That'll generate cash in any market condition, in any season, right? Would you be interested in that? Because if you are interested, we have a collection of assets, a collection of individuals, people, right? All put together already that are doing that. And so all you'd maybe need to do is add some additional capital, right? Add fuel to that engine, to that system to really see it grow even further. See, now that's really compelling. At least to me it is. To me, that's very interesting. I think it's less compelling and less interesting to say, hey, we really work well when hash prices are super high, but when hash prices are low, we're kind of like on this countdown timer to running out of money. And by the way, we don't really have a differentiated source of revenue, right? We're sort of like a run-of-the-mill Bitcoin miner, who profits when hash prices are good and doesn't really profit so much when hash prices are bad. Now, we already have, as you probably already know, we do have some differentiated source of revenue. Like, for example, being able to take the electricity that we produce at our two, right, wholly owned mine waste to energy facilities, Scrubgrass in Western Pennsylvania, Panther Creek here in Eastern Pennsylvania, to take that electricity and sell it to the grid. That's differentiated from most publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies. I think it's also very differentiated that we have this opportunity to capture carbon with our beneficial use ash, which is a byproduct of the mine waste to energy process. Now, it is still up in the air as to whether or not we're going to be listed in the Puro Earth Registry, which is owned by NASDAQ, so that we can become commercially transactable, right, as it relates to carbon removal credits. And that will represent yet another source of potential differentiated revenue. There are a couple other ways that we generate revenue, but again, just for the sake of keeping this somewhat succinct, to answer your question, hey, any news about a potential buyer? I mean, even if I did know, I don't know that it would be appropriate to comment publicly, right? But suffice it to say that as it relates to this issue of, hey, issuing more, some more stock to key members of management, to members of our board of directors, hey, you have to be willing to do certain things to align the interests of all parties, right? So hopefully that answers the question. And please keep them coming. If you happen to have a question, send a reply on X. You can post a comment on YouTube, and I will do my best to see if I can kind of circle around and provide you with a direct response like this. I'm sometimes not very good about getting into the comment section and sort of replying in a granular manner. I mean, I do sometimes do that, as you know, but sometimes I sort of struggle to sort of keep up with comments that way. But I read everything. I make an effort to read everything and to then really address topics that seem to be coming up over and over again. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your questions, your comments. I really do. So keep them coming. And until we speak again, let's stay positive. Let's be great and talk again soon.